have you ever noticed how you can change locations, change your circle and friends, change jobs, but somehow the same feelings and the same situations and problems keep following you? Different company, same problems at work. Different partner, same arguments. Different year, the same feeling of being stuck. And at a certain point, it stops feeling like bad luck and starts feeling like a pattern. And that is usually the moment people click to watch videos like this, because they're quietly asking themselves, why does my life feel like a rerun of the same old episode, over and over and over and over and over? Listen, I've been there too, more than one time in fact. There were times in my life where it felt like I was trapped in a story that wouldn't change no matter what. I changed habits, I tried being more positive, I told myself this time things will be different, and still, underneath all of it, the same old cycle kept pulling me back. And honestly, it took me a long time to understand what was actually happening beneath the surface. So in this video, let's decode what is really going on, what is actually happening beneath this pattern. Let's take a look at what a negative cycle actually is beneath the surface, why we secretly cling to it even while we try to escape it, and what we can actually do to break out of a negative cycle, for real this time. Hello, my beautiful superheroes. Welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here, hi. I'm Scarlet Grace, and this channel is all about helping you become the version of you who has it all. So let's start with that feeling, that sense that no matter what you try, life somehow circles back to the same storyline. And yeah, it is not exactly the same events, it is not exactly with the same people every time, but the underlying story is the same, and the emotions that you end up feeling are exactly the same. And if that's been happening to you, I want you to know that there is nothing wrong with you. There is actually a reason that goes deeper than luck or circumstances. And that is important to keep in mind, because when we go through negative cycles like that, we tend to make this personal for some reason, as if this means that there is something wrong with us. But if you stop for a moment and take a look around you, without trying to fix anything, without trying to change anything about your life, and you just observe the people around you, you will notice that most people are stuck in some kind of negative loop. It may not be the same as yours, but most people have something in their lives, some area of their lives where they feel that they keep trying something different and they keep getting the same results. For some people, it may be money. You probably know people who always want to make more money, but somehow the moment they get extra money, it just goes away. Something collapses, they have to fix something around the house, and it's gone. Or you may know people who have opportunities appearing out of thin air and then vanishing, and it doesn't even seem logical how this keeps happening to them, but it does. Or they may have a pattern in relationships. So this is a universal thing. It doesn't mean anything about you, about how intelligent you are, how much you try. It happens to most people in some area or other. And those cycles are not the exact same thing happening every time. Otherwise, it would be weird, right? It's more like an underlying signature. The events are not identical, but they kind of feel like a variation on the same theme, for example. And here's the thing. Those patterns all feel external, but the truth is they do not come from the outside world. They all originate internally. And this repetition is not punishment. Nobody is punishing you when you find yourself in the same kind of cycle, the same kind of situation repeating over and over and over, even when you try to change it. It is based purely on familiarity, which probably sounds weird unless you understand the mechanics of how it actually works, and then it will make perfect sense to you. By the way, if you feel stuck and you want better results in any area of your life without having to work even harder or constantly push things to change, you can work with me one-on-one. The link is in the description below. And if you prefer courses that you can do at your own pace, you will also find the links to my courses in the description. So here's how it works. Those loops, those negative cycles, when they happen, they're not kept alive by the outside world. Nobody's forcing those situations on you, even though, and I know, it feels like this is what is happening. It feels like you're doing everything in your power to have a different situation, but somebody forces the same old pattern, the same old situation on you, and you feel helpless. But that is not what is going on. What is going on is that you are a specific version of you. You have a specific identity, and that identity is what creates that cycle, that pattern over and over and keeps it alive and brings it back every time. And because those cycles are created through your identity, that is why you feel that you're making all this effort. You change your habits, you use a different approach, but nothing actually changes. You just end up in the same old cycle all over again. Your actions cannot break you out of this cycle. Your actions cannot change the circumstances that happen in your life for a very simple reason. It is your identity that comes first. In order for any action to be effective, it has to fit into your identity. And let's take a look at what identity actually is, because unless you understand that, it will sound like this weird mystical thing, how identity determines those cycles in your life and what happens. So what is identity? Identity is a collection of things. Your identity is your assumptions about yourself. I'm beautiful or I'm ugly. I'm a social person. I'm bad with people. I'm good with money. I'm bad with money. All those things and many, many more are part of your identity. Your identity is also your assumptions about how the world works, what you expect from other people. So your identity also includes your expectations from life, from a job, from your relatives, from the people around you, from society. That is also part of your identity. Your identity also includes your beliefs and your convictions. What do you believe in? And through your identity, many things that you don't notice get determined in your behavior, in what you believe is possible, and in your actions. Your identity decides what you notice. Opportunities are all around us, but you will not notice them all. You will only notice the ones that match your identity, because remember, identity is your beliefs, your assumptions, your expectations, your convictions. So if there is an opportunity that doesn't match any of those, it will literally be invisible to you. Your brain will not register it as an opportunity. So you will not be able to take advantage of it if you don't notice it, right? It makes sense. So your identity decides what you notice and what you overlook. Your identity decides what you pursue and what you don't pursue. Ever had that feeling of reading about something or watching something on TV, or somebody's talking about that thing and you have this feeling like this would be really good, but nah, that is not for me? Who is saying that when you have that thought? Who is having that thought that says this is not for me? Who is that me you're talking about? That is your identity. That is who makes that decision. When you look at the situation and you think, nah, that's not for me, or that's not for people like me. What you're saying is this doesn't match my identity. What you're saying is, I know myself a specific way. I'm this kind of person. This is what I can do and this is what I cannot do. This is who I am based on the way I grew up. So based on all of those things, this thing I'm looking at, that is not for me. That is not for people like me. That is literally a statement of this thing doesn't match my identity. And that is not necessarily bad, okay? Because maybe that thing that you're looking at doesn't match your identity, and that's a great thing because it's a bad thing. It's a thing that doesn't cause anything good to happen in your life. And that's great. But the problem is, this thought of this is not for me or this is not for people like me is automatic. So we don't ever stop to think if the thing that we're looking at is something that we want to have or not. Because if it's a bad thing and it's not for you, perfectly fine. You just skip the bad thing because it doesn't match your identity and you're going to have a better life because of it. But what if it's a good thing? What if it is a good thing? What if it is the exact thing that you want, but the moment you have an opportunity to make it appear in your life, to make it yours, you reject it because your identity kicks in and says, this is not for me. That is the trap of identity, because most people never actually examine their identity, because we have this idea in our minds that who we are is a fixed thing. It's like God made us this way, end of story. It doesn't change. You have no control over it. You are who you are. And that is entirely wrong. Psychology says it's wrong. Everybody says it's wrong, but still, most people on this planet navigate their lives as if their identity is a fixed thing that can never change. So if there is something and you feel that this is not for me, that's how it's doomed to remain until the end of times. And that is not true. Because the truth is, your identity is a very malleable thing. You can literally decide to change who you are at any moment. And in fact, you are not the same person throughout your whole life. You have changed parts of your identity many, many, many times. Think about it. Are you the exact same person you were when you were 3 years old? Really think about it. Are you the same person? Do you want the same things? Do you believe you can do and cannot do the same things? For example, when I was 3, some of my favorite foods back then are things that I really don't like eating right now. When I was 3, I thought that you need to be super, super talented to be able to drive a car. I admired people who could drive a car because I was 3 and I couldn't drive a car. And it wasn't because of intelligence or anything else. I was just too little to drive a car, right? And I also at the same time thought that kids that were a year or two older than me, they were so grown up. And I bet some of you had the same thoughts back then. Do you still believe that now? Do you still believe that 5-year-olds are so mature and grown-ups? Because I don't. And hopefully you don't either. So you're not the same person you were when you were 3 years old. Are you the same person you were in high school? Can you honestly tell me that nothing has changed since then? Were you the same person when you were in high school and when you were in college, for example? Most people are not. Because as you navigate life and as you have new experiences, you discard parts of your old identity and adopt new ones. So maybe when you were 11 years old, you wanted to have a school bag with a Barbie on it, for example, and that was the coolest thing in the world, and you honestly believed that you were the coolest person in school because you had that bag that was the coolest thing. And then 2 years later, you wouldn't be caught dead carrying that bag because that's for babies and you're not a baby anymore. That is an identity change. So this idea that we have a fixed identity and we cannot do anything about it, is completely wrong. What happens is that as we grow older, and especially as we become adults, we have this fixed view of who we are, and we decide that this cannot change. And we basically strap ourselves with a set of limitations, limiting views of how we see the world and ourselves and life. And we think this is how things are. And we don't realize that those are just parts of our identity. Those are basically just opinions. And other people have different opinions about life. And if you want to have success in any area of your life, instead of defending your old identity, the person that you know you have been up until now, it is way more useful to look into what different identity could I have around this. In other words, you are a person who keeps experiencing the same negative cycle in a specific area of your life. Let's say it's money. So instead of trying to take action to force your way out of the negative cycle while remaining the same person on the inside, which means that you will keep missing the same opportunities you have always been missing because you still don't see them, because they still don't match your identity, they still don't match your interpretation of the world. What you need to do is you need to actually start asking yourself, how does a person who actually doesn't go through this negative cycle, a person who actually has success in this specific area of life, how do they see the world? How do they see themselves? What is different? Because they must be doing something differently to be getting different results, right? And it's not just the actions, because you probably already tried to take different actions and it didn't pay off the way you expected. So that should clue you in that there is something more important than actions. Maybe those actions are not the wrong actions. They just need to be plugged into the right identity for the whole system to work and get you what you want. So the question is, what does a person who actually has a positive experience in that area of life and isn't going through the cycle you have been going through over and over and over, how do they think differently? How do they see themselves differently? What different assumptions do they have? What do they believe or don't believe that is different from what you believe or don't believe right now? Somehow they see the world and themselves differently, and that leads to different results. So your job is not to try to figure out the right action. Your job is to try to figure out the right identity that automatically matches the results that you want to have. Because when you have that, then the actions come naturally. And just to give you an example, let's say that you're a person who has been overweight for a very long time and you're not fit at all. If you decide to just take massive action, it will not last long as your identity remains the same. Because if your identity is, I have always been overweight and I'm lazy and I hate the gym, how long will you be able to sustain taking massive action from that identity? You're literally saying, I am not the person who works out regularly. I'm not the person who cares very much about what I am eating. So how long will you have the willpower to force yourself to do all those things that clearly don't match your identity? Not very long, right? But think about something that is actually part of your identity. Like you identify as a person who loves dancing, for example. Does somebody have to force you to dance? Or do you just dance because you love it at every opportunity that you have? You don't need willpower. You don't need to figure out the right actions to dance, because that's part of your identity. You love dancing. So if you want to have the things or do the actions and get the results for something else, you need to become the person who matches those actions. You cannot do that from the identity of, I hate working out, I hate the gym, I hate salads, I hate thinking about what to eat. You have to sit and think, okay, who do I know who naturally goes to the gym and they don't seem to have to force themselves? Why? How do they think about that? And if you don't know, you can talk to people. You can literally talk to people. And people will reveal their own identity, what they believe about something, what they believe about themselves. Because if you become a person who loves going to the gym, then you won't have to use willpower to do it. You will naturally go to the gym because it will match your identity. Same with anything. And I'm using practical examples here so that you can easily see how identity has to match the behavior. Otherwise, no matter what action you take, it will not last long and it will not give you any results. But this applies to anything. It doesn't just apply to goals like going to the gym or something practical. It applies to any kind of manifestation you have. It's just that practical examples let you see more easily how exactly this works. So let's say that you are a complete slob. You don't clean, you don't tidy up, your house is a mess. And you wake up one day very motivated and you're like, I'm going to clean this place up and everything will be neat and tidy and I will declutter and I will donate all the extra stuff that I don't need so that I have an environment that looks beautiful and works for me. And you take massive action, like you take a week off work to get this thing the way you want it to be. Well, more than 50% of the people who try to do this never actually finish the task. They don't finish the task because it doesn't match who they are on the inside. They still identify as slobs. So halfway during this process, they will be like, why am I doing this to myself? And the work will remain unfinished. But let's say that you push through, you really decided to do it this time, and you declutter the whole thing. Tell me, what do you think is going to happen if you keep identifying as a slob who hates cleaning and never tidies anything up? How long before this space that you spend days cleaning and tidying up and decluttering, how long until it gets back to its previous situation, to its previous condition? Just tell me, if you are the kind of person who is kind of a slob, just tell me, how long does it last when you clean up? Because I have been a slob for most of my life, not in an extreme way, but I can tell you, I can spend 3 days making everything perfect, and within less than a day, I can make a mess of it again. Why? Because I identify as a person who hates tidying up and cleaning. So unless you change that inner identity, you can never maintain the results. And that is exactly why you stay trapped in a negative cycle. It doesn't match your identity. Whereas a person who naturally identifies as a person who likes cleaning and tidying up, they do not have to force themselves to do it. They do it automatically. They just don't leave dirty dishes in the sink. They just don't. They don't have to think about it. They just don't. So if you don't change the identity, how you see yourself, how you identify, what you expect of yourself, what you expect of the world, that is why any action that you take doesn't give you the results that you want, or you get the thing you want temporarily and then you lose it again. It cannot have momentum because it is not supported by your identity. It runs on your willpower. The moment you're sad or upset or low in energy or you get the flu, it collapses. You cannot take the action anymore because it isn't supported by your identity. And again, I'm talking about any kind of desire, any kind of goal at all, not just things like having a neat apartment, for example, or working out. Any manifestation goal, relationships, money, promotions, anything you can think of, it runs on the same pattern. It's just that practical things that you can easily observe are easier examples so that you can see that connection. And here's the thing. Something most people never consider is how much time they've spent being the old version of themselves. So, I mentioned earlier how you have changed identities many times in your life, but the moment you become an adult, you start solidifying one identity, and then most people don't change it for years, for decades. And if you combine that with the fact that this knowledge, whether it's manifestation or how your brain works and how identity works, is pretty new to you. And when I say pretty new, maybe you have spent years, maybe you have spent the past decade learning about those things. But if you're 40 years old now, for example, that is still 30 years that you operated without that knowledge. So it's not like you grew up in an environment that taught you how reality works and how you can change your identity at any moment to match your desires and get everything you want, and you're failing at it. It's literally knowledge that you may know on an intellectual level, but it hasn't necessarily been integrated so that you always think like that 24/7. And what happens is, exactly because it's a newer thing to you, it hasn't been fully integrated for most people. When things get bad, you slip back into the old version of you. The old version of you who tries to fix things through taking massive action, or begging, or feeling hopeless. And when that happens, people then feel really bad with themselves, as if they ruined their whole lives and it's their fault. And that is not true. You just have decades of self-reinforced concepts in your mind, decades of identifying as a certain version of you, decades of interpreting how the world and reality works differently than you know now that you know about manifesting and getting all your dreams. You had decades of interpreting the world in a different way. So this new part of your identity, the part of your identity that is all about shaping your life the way you want, is still kind of new. It's still kind of unstable and fragile. So it makes sense that when things get bad, you may slip. You may slip into some other version of you. You may forget that you have the power to determine the circumstances in your life. You may forget that you have power over what happens, that life doesn't happen to you. Life happens because of you and through you. And that is completely okay. You don't have to blame yourself for that. There is actually a reason why you get pulled back so easily. It's not that you're lazy. It's not that you don't know how to use all those things. It's not that you're not intelligent enough. It's not that you're not trying hard enough. It's none of those things. There is a valid reason why you get pulled back so easily into an old state, into an old identity. So here's the mechanics of it. When you have a set identity for a period of time, this identity has momentum. That part of your identity has specific emotions that it connects to specific situations, and you have been through those same situations many times, experiencing the same emotions. So you literally have specific reactions hardwired into your brain right now that say, for example, when this happens, I react like this. I think this and this and this about myself and about the world, and I feel like this. And it can be anything. For example, it can be about money. You notice a good opportunity, you go after the opportunity, it seems like it's going to pay off, and somehow you lose the opportunity. It just poofs away. And your wiring says, that is when I start thinking that of course it was too good to be true. That matches your old identity, right? Of course it was too good to be true. And I'm a fool for thinking that this time things would be different. And now you feel powerlessness and despair. And then you have a thought like, this kind of thing is not for people like me. How could I even believe that I could have this? That's not for me. That's not for people like me. And this is a packet that is hardwired into your mind. Your neurons are literally connecting to reinforce those thoughts and those emotions. Why? Because those are part of your old identity. And if you've lived with that identity for, say, 10 or 15 or 20 years, that is what the brain does. If you have the same series of thoughts and emotional reactions all together around the same type of situation, 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 20 times, 50 times, 100 times, in order to conserve energy, it will make the neurons that connect those thoughts and emotions form connections so that they fire all together automatically. It's like pushing a button and you have the exact same thoughts and the exact same emotions, because that's what you programmed your mind to do. That's how you programmed your mind to react to such situations, to such scenarios. So it's not your fault that you end up being pulled in that direction. You are literally just following the wire in your mind. It's like hitting enter and your laptop runs a program. You're hitting enter in your brain when the situation happens and you just run the automatic program. So unlike what many people think, when that kind of thing happens, that doesn't mean you're messed up or you can never change. It doesn't mean anything like that. It just means you have installed a program in your mind that is still active. And when you try to create a new identity, the old identity will always try to pull you back. Because you have to understand that all those patterns, all those programs in your mind, in your subconscious that are trying to pull you back into the same failures and the same negative emotions and the same thoughts that make you feel powerless, they are not doing it because they hate you. They are doing it because your mind is trying to protect you. Your mind is literally trying to keep you alive. All the things that you identify now as blocks, or as limiting beliefs. You adopted them at some point in your life because at the time they were safe to believe. They were protecting you from something worse. They were giving you a framework so that a chaotic situation would make sense to you, so that it wouldn't feel so chaotic and dangerous anymore. And that usually happens when you're too young to be able to actually examine a thought and decide if it's something you want to believe or not. It's usually a reaction to your external circumstances at a very young age where you don't have critical thinking yet. And you develop a belief that may seem limiting now, may seem negative now, but back then it worked to protect you. Like if, for example, you grew up very poor in a poor neighborhood and somebody told you when you were 4 and admiring that shiny car that this is not for people like us, you internalize that belief so that you won't be disappointed. You accept in advance that those kinds of things, they're not for people like me. I will never have them. So that you won't hope to have them one day and get disappointed. So the mechanism is there to protect you from getting hurt and getting disappointed. It's not there to actually stop you from having good things. It's to stop you from being crushed the way a 3-year-old would be crushed when they tell you, every other kid can have this toy, but you cannot. Can you imagine how terrible that feels when you're 3 years old? So in order to not experience that, you internalize a belief to protect you from ever hoping to have that thing or legitimately believing that this thing is for you so that you won't be crushed when you discover that you cannot have it. It's a protection mechanism. Or if you grow up around people who are extremely judgmental and they keep telling you can never do anything right, you develop the belief that I can never do anything right, so that you will stop trying and pouring all your energy into something only to get disappointed. You just accept, yeah, I cannot do anything right. Mom and dad are right. I will do everything they say because I'm stupid. It hurts less and it conserves energy if you develop such a belief. So at the time when it got developed, when it got planted in your mind, it was there to protect you from something worse, from some pain that was worse, especially when you're very young and things can hurt you more deeply because you don't have critical thinking. You cannot understand why people behave the way they do. You assume, for example, that your parents, because they're grown-ups, are perfect people when you're 3. You have to grow up to realize that parents are not perfect people, they're just human. And maybe some parents are pretty messed up and they were very, very far from perfect. But when you're 3, you don't have that perspective. So your mind has to protect you by installing beliefs that will keep you safe within the environment that you are growing up in. And those beliefs become limiting when you grow up and you decide you want more from life. But the thing is, when you decide you want something different, when you're under pressure, when something negative happens, your brain will fall back into plan B and will try to pull you back into the old identity. And the reason it is trying to pull you back into the old identity with all those limiting beliefs about what you cannot do and what is not for you is because it knows, it has data for 20 or 30 or 40 years that you survived without old identity. Whether you are happy with it or not, it doesn't care because it doesn't care about your happiness. It literally cares about your survival. You're still alive, you're still breathing, so what we know for sure is that believing that you cannot have the money or the car or the relationship is safe for you because you believe that for 20 years and you're still alive and breathing. It will try to pull you towards the identity that is safe, that it knows that it is safe because you had it for decades and you're still alive. And that identity comes with all those neurons firing together because they have done so millions of times while you had that identity. And if that doesn't work, it will create emotions in you to pull you back into that identity. Emotions like shame, like guilt, like disappointment. Because those emotions have big emotional gravity. Like imagine you allowed yourself to believe that you can have something better in an area of your life. More money, for example, than you ever had before. And it fails. And you feel disappointment. And then you feel shame, like, oh my God, people will laugh at me for thinking I can actually have that. Who am I kidding? That is not for people like me. And your brain uses that shame to keep you back from pursuing the thing you want, to protect you from actually being crushed, from getting the thing and losing it, from people finding out that you wanted that thing and you went after it when it is obvious that this is not for you, right? That is what your old identity says. It is not your fault when you fail to maintain your new identity when things get bad. Your brain is literally wired to go into safe mode, and safe mode is the identity that it has known for a very long time. Your job when that happens is to recognize what is happening. It's to recognize that this negative situation that is happening doesn't mean I cannot have this thing. It just means that I'm still operating from an old identity that says I cannot have this thing. And that is why I'm feeling bad. I'm feeling guilty. I'm feeling ashamed. I'm feeling disappointed. I'm feeling crushed. That is not proof that I cannot have this thing. That is proof that my brain is still wired to fire all those neurons together to give me that exact mix of thoughts and emotions that I've had around this issue my whole life. That's it. Once you recognize it, it's like taking a step back from it, and you can even allow it to play out for a while without sinking into it for months or years. The trap people fall into is that they take this as confirmation that they shouldn't have pursued that thing to begin with, that they cannot have the thing they want, that they shouldn't have that goal. That is not true. All it means is that there is some kind of incoherence between who you are and what you say you want, and that is why you're feeling that shame, that guilt, that disappointment. Your job is to recognize that and realize that, okay, when I feel better, I need to go into my identity and see what I believe or what I assume and what I expect that doesn't match the life that I want to have, and change that and stick to that. That is all it is. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't mean that you're not destined to have that thing. None of that. I know your brain is trying to tell you that. That is just to keep you safe. That is not the truth. And even if you don't feel it, even if it doesn't feel real that this is not the truth while you're going through it, just knowing that no matter how ashamed and guilty and disappointed I feel right now, this is just my brain trying to keep me safe. It's nothing more. This helps break the power that those states have over you, so that they don't have to last that long, so that you can get up and move in the direction of the thing you want again very soon after. The trap is when you allow yourself to fall into guilt and you keep blaming yourself for not being able to do this right. And why do other people change their beliefs and get the life they want and I cannot? That is a trap. Don't fall into it. It's a trap. You're not doing anything wrong. There's nothing inherently wrong with you. You're not messed up. You're a normal human being going through the exact process all humans go through when they want to change something that requires a change in their inner identity for it to change. You are normal. This is normal. There is nothing wrong. So now that you have some understanding of how exactly identity works and how those negative cycles work, what the mechanics behind them are, what do you actually do to break out of a negative cycle? Like practically, what do you do to put all this knowledge into some kind of plan to break out of that cycle? Well, glad you asked. So here's the thing. Most people live as if they have accidentally signed a contract with reality. A contract that says, because life has been a certain way, it must continue being that way, no matter what. And that belief alone can trap you in a negative cycle for years. So the first thing that you have to keep in mind when you want to break out of a negative cycle is that what happened in the past doesn't actually mean anything. People tend to assume that the past equals the future. If something happened again and again and again in the past, that is what they expect will happen in the future. That is not true. The reason it kept happening was because that was your old identity. If you change your inner identity, it will stop happening. So anything that happened in the past is just old facts. They don't determine what will happen in the future. You determine what will happen in the future. So what you need to figure out to break out of a negative cycle is who you need to be so that you don't have that cycle and you experience something completely different. And a way to figure that out is this, because here's the thing. Most people think that stepping into a new identity is a series of new things they have to do. But it's not so much about the things that you have to do or the things that you have to add in your life. They're also the things that you need to remove because they don't match your new identity. So what you need to figure out in order to step into a new identity and break the negative cycle for good is two different things. One thing is analyze the situation. What is the negative situation? What is the negative cycle you are in? What happens exactly? And how do you behave when that happens? And what is going through your mind before you behave the way you do? Because that is how you determine what the old identity is. So, for example, again, practical example so that you can easily see how this works. Let's go back to the person who is overeating and not working out and trying to get their ideal body. What is going on? What's the cycle? The cycle is you binge eat late at night. So this is the behavior. That's what you're doing. You're binge eating, and that's why you remain stuck and you never shed the extra weight that you want to lose, right? So what is going on in your mind before you actually do this? What is going on? So a few different things can be going on. One of those or all of those or maybe something completely different. But here are a few examples. There is this voice that says, you deserve that chocolate. You worked hard today. You're tired. You deserve it. So what does that say? That says that you are used to using food as a reward. Or you may have this voice that says, oh, life is short, have that cookie, because who are you kidding? You're never going to shed those 40 pounds anyway. So that is what is going on in your mind before you have the cookie. Or you may just feel this sense of emptiness that you feel with food. In which case, you need to sit down and ask yourself, what is it that I'm really missing? And I'm trying to numb it and feel that hole with food. Is it a romantic partner? Is it social connections? What happened in your life? What is the actual need that you're covering with food instead of addressing it? Because if you address the need that causes the binge eating, you will stop binge eating. But if you don't know what is going on and all you know is I cannot keep on a diet, you cannot go anywhere because you don't know the identity that makes you not be able to keep your diet, right? So that's why you have to really observe the different aspects of a situation where you feel stuck to realize what is the action or the lack of action. In other words, what are you doing that is perpetuating this cycle? What actions are you taking that is perpetuating the cycle, like binge eating, for example? What actions that you should be taking, you aren't taking? You aren't going to the gym even though you paid the subscription, for example, okay? And then you have to ask yourself, why? What is going on in my mind and in my emotions before I take that action? Or before I decide not to take that action? And again, that has to do with any desire, not just with this, okay? No matter what your goal is, something is going on in your mind and in your emotions that force you to do something or not do something. That force you to do something that is not useful to you, or force you to not do something that would be useful to you if you did it, but somehow it feels super hard for some reason. Well, that reason is in your mind and in your emotions. And once you have an idea of, and it will not just be one situation necessarily. Like with losing weight, it can be different situations. How you behave when you start binge eating, what you do when you have to eat in social situations, whether you go to the gym or not, whether you take the bus or drive to work or you walk. Different parts of your life, but they all have to do with the same cycle that you want to break. But once you have that, then you ask yourself, in all those situations, how would a person that naturally had what I want to have behave differently? And if you have any person in your life that you can use as inspiration, that is very helpful. Because this is not about some vague idea of what people would do. What do people who naturally have what you want to have do differently? That's the question. It doesn't matter if it's about your body or about money or about relationships. They do something differently. And the reason they do something differently is that they have different thoughts and different emotions and different beliefs. They have a different identity. And that is what we're trying to imitate here. So what do they do differently? For example, you may notice that people who are generally thin and have the kind of body that you want to have, rarely eat so much that they feel bloated and bad. They may not avoid different types of foods. Maybe they eat all the different things that you want to eat. They just don't eat, for example, 3 bars of chocolate. They just eat a couple of pieces slowly and they're satisfied. Maybe they eat more slowly. So you do the same process for the people who have what you want, so that you can see the inner mechanics of how their identity works and what kinds of actions fit that identity. With any kind of desire, it could be money. What do people who are more successful with money do differently than you do? And why do they do that differently? What kinds of statements do they use that when you hear them, they sound odd to you because they don't match your identity, the way you see money, the way you see investments, the way you see the world? Because I guarantee you, there is something different. And if you do not accept that they are thinking in a different way, and maybe your way of seeing things is not helping you and is not correct and you should discard it, you will remain stuck. And if you don't know, if you don't have a person that you can talk to or that you can clearly observe what belief or thought is different or emotion is different, but you can still see the actions, write down the actions of a person who has what you want. And then ask yourself, what does that person believe to be able to do that when I don't? How did this person feel about this before doing it? Because that is what is different. You know, the difference can be that one person, for example, with a gym example, one person feels that going to the gym is this hard work that they have to do but they hate, and that's you, and that's why you're not getting the results and the consistency you want. Another person may feel that I need to go there because I feel so much better afterwards, because I love the stretching and my muscles love the workout and I feel so much better after the gym. So of course the person who feels that going to the gym makes them feel awesome afterwards is going to go without having to spend any energy persuading themselves to go. While you, if you feel that it sucks and it's something that you are forced to do to get a result, you're not going to go as easily. So the question is, what do they do differently? And what do you believe is going through their mind and their emotions so that they're able to do that thing so easily? Every desire corresponds to a specific identity. And that identity has its own logic, its own beliefs, its own assumptions, its own emotional responses. And your current self wants the entire plan. And the most important thing is this, to figure out the assumptions, the emotional responses, and the logic of the version of you that matches having your desire. Not even the actions. Maybe you have a desire where you literally see no physical actions you can take right now. And what most people do in those situations is they're Try hard to figure out the how. What do I do? What's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? Relax. That is not what you need. What you need is to figure out the identity that you need to step into and start embodying it. Because you right now may not know what action to take. You may not see any action that you can take to get what you want. But guess what? The version of you who already has that result, the version of you who has your ideal body, the version of you who has the money that you want, the promotion that you want, the social life that you want, the relationship that you want, that version knows. That version knows. You don't have to figure anything out, and you cannot figure it out from your current identity. Because if you could, wouldn't things have changed already? But that version of you already knows. So all you have to do is step into that identity, figure out what is different between you now and that version of you who has what you desire, and start being that person now. Start thinking like that person, start having the same assumptions, start believing the same things, start behaving the same way in everyday situations, not necessarily by doing something to get your result. And when you embody that new version of you, you will suddenly see things that you couldn't see before. You will see opportunities that were literally invisible to you before. You will feel inspired to do things that are the exact right things to get what you want that you would have never thought of doing. And it makes sense that you never thought of doing them, because if you thought of doing them, your problem would have been solved and you wouldn't be in the same cycle. But when you become the version of you who already matches the result, who already has the result, that version knows what to do. And suddenly you will know what to do, because you will not be the same person trapped in the same thought loops that make the things that you need to be doing invisible to you. And that is how you break out of a negative cycle in your life.